My name is Carlos Morales. I will be giving my first speech on my speech, War in the Middle East. War. Something that has been around since the existence of man. Countless wars, countless battles within those wars, victories, losses, depending on what side of the fence you were on. Allow us to turn back the hands of time, taking us back 19 years to the year of 2001, a year most Americans will never forget. Many of us, including myself, were only babies with no recollection of where we were at or of what we were doing with our families when this tragedy occurred. We are, of course, talking about the unfortunate event of 9/11, the day that would ultimately resort to the United States waging war on terrorism, a war that we still fight to this day. This means that American troops have been sacrificing, fighting, and dying overseas on foreign soil in order to carry out the mission of the United States, basically ever since I was born. Everybody who is old enough to understand what was happening remembers that there were where they remembers where they were at or what they were doing when they found out about the act of terrorism. For many, it was a calling to joining the armed forces in order to protect our country and its people. I bring you all here today to speak about where the darkest things of what one human being can do to another human being takes place. We are talking about war. We, of course, are not talking about any war, however. We are talking about the ongoing war that has plagued the Middle East with terror and violence. The same war that a lot of us probably have had some sort of family who has fought or is currently fighting in order to keep us safe. Nowadays, Americans are still very separated on terms of their political views and moral values. Instead of agreeing to disagree, most people in America either stand on the left or they stand on the right. Very few are smart enough to do what we did when this tragedy happened, and that is meeting in the middle. I was not old enough to see it for myself, but the ones who were there speak of how great and how truly inspiring it was to see all Americans come forth as one. At that time, it did not matter who you were voting for. It did not matter if our moral values were aligned. It did not matter if we agreed on the same policies. None of this mattered. What mattered at this time was coming together and to get to the conclusion of we love our country. What are we going to do about this? Which is in fact what weighed in the heavy decision of protecting the nation we built by leaving our homes and going overseas straight into the heart of where terrorism lies, the Middle East. The beginning of the war was horrific to say the least. War itself is horrifying, but this is a war like we have never seen one before. Going into a completely new environment in which we are not used to is always one of the greatest challenges. In World War II, it was urbanized warfare where Allied troops pushed through cities in France and Germany in order to defeat the Axis. In Vietnam, our troops had to fight a new and different style of war, which is jungle warfare. They had to adapt to the intense and scorching heat and humidity, which is heavy in itself, but that was the least of their worries, seeing as there were Vietnamese snipers hiding in trees and kamikaze troops hiding in foxholes all throughout these jungles that they were being patrolled. Moving on to the current war, and we come across a new type of war once again. Not just the fact that this one takes place in a sandy desert, but the enemy harbors new weapons of mass destruction. War has never been clean, nor has it ever been pretty. It has always been dirty and ugly. There is no way to say which war is worse than the other, but in my opinion, troops have to deal with something catastrophic, which I would personally be most paranoid about more than anything else. And we are talking about IEDs, or improvised explosive devices, which are made by terrorists. I could go on and on about the disgustingly creative ways these terrorists use these bombs not only against us, but against their own people. I will only give a few examples in order to paint a real picture of the differences of all these wars. Most know about the countless IEDs which are set on the main roads, which are to target heavy infantry vehicles which carry American troops. Another way is they will strap an IED onto another human being who is usually going to be mentally handicapped, and they will send them into a crowd of civilians or American troops, and well, you know what happens after that. On the bright side of things, after years and years, after countless sacrifices, and after many casualties, the US, with the help of other allied countries, are now getting to the point to the war of where we are occupying less and less bases in the Middle East, and every year we are pulling more and more troops out. That is up until, of course, we had what I like to call the Great Scare, because Trump called in a drone strike which killed an Iranian general, which could have potentially started World War III. But thankfully, the Iranian chief said he does not wish death to America, but that he wishes death to Trump and the other higher ranking military personnel who were personally responsible for the drone strike, which means we avoided a whole war. War is the most raw, unfiltered version of what one man could do to another man for the greater cause that is valued to that individual. This war has lasted throughout the presidency of three different people, but war is something that has happened since the first civilizations were formed, and unfortunately, it will continue to happen long after we are gone. And it could even happen again within our lifetimes, seeing as it has already happened once.